Okay, let's call this meeting the Haysville Planning Commission order. For first item of business is a roll call.
Blood.
Here.
Plummer.
Here.
Rankin.
Here.
Azier.
Here.
McCollum.
Here.
Atkins.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Next item of business is a presentation and approval of minutes of March 23rd, 2023.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Before we do that, the Holland in the middle of the page, the first instance has 3 L's in it. That's the only typo that I saw, but
Thank you. Accept.
so. We have a motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Under new business, we have a review and zoning code amendment definitions and zoning chart.
So I do have Matt here tonight from PEC. We had recently told you guys that we were gonna be working on the zoning code, that definitions and use chart and everything that we're gonna be coming forward to you. I reached out to PEC because of Matt's experience with the City of Wichita and helping us fine tune these, kind of get some of the gaps that we were missing. And so I'm gonna let him come up and speak, and he's got the chart and explains what we're looking at with definitions and everything, so.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm Matt Williams. I'm a land use planner at PEC. Before I was there, I was a land use planner with Wichita and Sedgwick County. So we dealt a lot with zoning and land use in the city, but also the unincorporated county. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the jurisdictions around here and how they handle this type of issues. So yeah, as Georgie said, I was asked to take a look at the zoning code and kind of help move the process forward of updating some of these things. And one of the first recommendations I had was to put together this use chart. So right now the zoning code goes through each zoning district, and it in the middle of the code, you know, between a span of like 30 pages, it'll list the zoning district, and then it will list all of the uses that are permitted by right or by conditional use. And, you know, to find, just like we were talking about the Kitty College before this, to find what use is allowed where can be a little confusing. So this use chart is meant to make that process more efficient, simpler for both staff and the public to be able to pull out this use chart, see what their zoning district allows and what it doesn't allow right off the top of the page. This use chart is also helping us find inconsistencies within the code. So I'll get into that here in a few minutes. But so one thing with this use chart is for planning, it helps to be able to have definitions in the code that go along with what's allowed in each district. A lot of times people will come in and you know, even new uses that are maybe there's not in the community, it helps to have definitions that you're able to pinpoint what that falls under. So if they're manufacturing cell phone cases, you know, you kind of look at the uses and try to find a use that definition can fit under. Perhaps you have a manufacturing use that you can find the definition, it fits under that, and you can look at the use chart and find what categories it fits in. So part of this process was looking at all of the uses that are in the code and seeing if they had definitions, and if they didn't, helping craft definitions for those. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and I think Georgie's hope in this whole process is, maybe you could speak on that, just to make the zoning code clearer, to fix inaccuracies or inconsistent things throughout the zoning code.
Yeah, and I think you guys have 3 different sections of paper there. And so the one that says existing use and then proposed use, does everybody understand? So the existing use lists the different multiple things that we have throughout the code, and we've talked about this where, I'm trying to think of a weird term, fat production or something that we've talked about in the past, and then just, you know, radio tower, television tower, multiple things. And so like similar there, those should be all wireless tower. On this front sheet, you know, you see several different from our existing code of references to school, and those should be all school. But when you look through our definitions and then go through each district, you have all these things and it doesn't always match up. So what we're trying to do is clean that up, and then the chart will be easier for someone comes in and asks Jonathan, hey, and you're just like, you're asking me right now, what could go into Kitty College? You can look under commercial, that's a light commercial, and anything that says P, anything with a C would be conditional use. Does that make that easy to understand? So this sheet right here is just what Matt has taken all our uses and made the term over here what they would go under proposed use. Does that make sense?
And then that matches up to this.
And then this is what we're going to in the future, which goes to these proposed uses over on this side, which ties in with our definitions, but then the districts are at the top, and then you look at the chart for what district, and then if it's a permitted use, it'd be P. If it doesn't have anything, it's not allowed. If it would be C, it would be conditional use. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
So what Matt's going to do is go through the definitions, and this is just the start of it. This is gonna be an ongoing process, but this is kind of the first step.
Yeah, good.
Anybody have any questions? That was probably a little bit longer than what you wanted.
No, that's a good explanation. Yeah, so this existing and proposed use document, so the code listed all of these existing uses on the left. So it would say, in certain places it would say libraries allowed, and in other places it would say public libraries are allowed, or golf courses and public golf courses. So it's kind of all of these things that didn't really go along with each other. So I've kind of narrowed them down to the uses on the right, and that's kind of the uses we're thinking about renaming in the code, and then those align with the chart that we have.
And this is something, if everybody remembers, in the last year, we went through a zone change, and Tim has brought up, so we're gonna go through all these uses, we need to look at them. This is something that's been discussed of, why do we have everything detailed out? This doesn't make much sense. So this puts it into a much simpler and should be easier to use.
Good.
Yeah, like one example is the code would it said in the office, commercial district, it said, you can have an engineering office, you can have an architect's office. It would list off all of the different offices. And so obviously we just reclassify that as office. And then in the definition of office, it says this can be, it's going to explain more what an office is. So really just clean up issues. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and I think the hope is that we'll have a planning commission in the future where we'll have a public hearing to make these updates. But right now, after creating this chart, we've noticed several inconsistencies like I talked about. So in one of the districts, for example, it listed a daycare was allowed by right, so it was permitted. But then under the conditional use category a little bit below, it said daycare general required a conditional use. So it had this two different terms, but there were no definitions for what those actually were, so it's hard to tell what the difference was. So little issues like that we're gonna have to go through. Probably staff would help comb through the code to find these little issues that are gonna make it more clear. And then also with them all being in a chart like this, you can kind of look to left to right to see, well, why is this allowed in this district but not in the district next to it? It's like, why are all the uses that are allowed in limited industrial, why are they not allowed in heavy industrial? You would think that it would, not vice versa. Something in the most restrictive district, or in the most permitted district, heavy industrial, allowing the most intense uses isn't going to be allowed in limited industrial, but you would expect it to go the opposite direction. And then also going through the definitions, there's lots of definitions in here for uses that are not listed in your code for where they're allowed. So I've gone through, and not necessarily in your copy, but in my copy, there's definitions for like drinking establishment, educational institutions, banking services, barn dominiums. And it gives all of these definitions, but then nowhere in the code does it mention where those are allowed or not allowed. So my opinion would be we could take those out of the definitions section.
So Matt, in the definitions, everything that's in red is stuff that we've added.
Right.
Correct.
Everything, so yeah, everything in black is the existing document, and then everything in red is my proposed changes, draft changes at this point.
So moving on to that.
Yeah.
One, if you guys look into the definitions, and one just like automobile service center. And I don't, Tim, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you've been in planning longer than I have. I don't think much has been done to these
No.
ever, right? Okay, so
There
that's.
have been some specific changes to individual, like signs, as defined by Appendix D, Haysville Municipal Code, stuff like that, where with the definition reference something else, but nobody's looked at it wholesale like this, as far as I know.
Okay. And this is where this ties in with uses and violations and uses of properties, and people, you know, have a tendency to complain, and well, some of it ties to this because of what it was been allowed in the past. So this helps set rules for that going forward, so. But, under Automobile Service Center, you'll see like all those 14 points underneath it. Yeah, it doesn't need to have all that.
Yeah, we could make that much more generic. So we'll update that definition with, you know, a link like the rest of them, and it won't list off every single thing.
On the next page, you can see like community building owned or operated by the city. There's also a term for, government service. Those can be combined. It's a lot of stuff like that. So I don't know if there's any other points you wanna.
Yeah, I've got a few notes. So like in here it lists Class A club and Class B club. And I think those are terms that come from the licensing for clubs. But if you look in the use chart, they're both allowed in the same district, so there's not really any reason to separate them out in here.
As far as zoning, we don't need to separate them. As far as our license part, that's beyond us. Does that make sense?
I have a
You know,
question on
one
this.
thing I would probably do, oh, go ahead.
The automobile service center, back to that, it says automobile, anything with a gross vehicle weight under 10,000 pounds. Do we address somewhere in here vehicles over 10,000, like trucks?
I'm sure that we do, yeah, usually it's considered truck.
I was looking quickly through and didn't find anything.
We'll make a note to
Yeah.
make sure we look for that. So that's one thing that we're gonna want you guys to look through this and look for details and stuff that we might not catch.
And one thing I would like to do is maybe compare this to some codes from other communities right around here to see if there's any additional uses that might need to be added.
Tiny homes is one that we do have a district for that I didn't notice till today, that wasn't on the chart. So Matt and I discussed that, and there's gotta be a definition in here. And there's quite a bit of work put into that years ago. And in case we did leave that district, in case someone did try to come in and do something like that, we do have, you know, that policy that you guys went through and was set, so.
Do you know if there's any land zone that right now?
No, there's not. Freighting or trucking yard or terminal, that's one that I had asked Matt, you know, that this doesn't give a whole lot of definition if it can be just a yard. I wanna know if it has to have a structure on it, cause that's not really something, depending, you know, that we would wanna determine where that would go. That would be something that might be only a conditional use. So that's something we're gonna look at the definition of, other towns and kinda go forward. So that's one that, just an example that needs to be looked at a little bit more.
There was the vehicle repair that you wanted to add, the 45-day period too, to make sure that vehicles that were inoperable could only be up to 45 days on a property zoned that.
And that's just kinda something that's came from dealing with other cases in court that I wanna make sure gets in here. Inoperable vehicle, we didn't actually have a definition in here, so pulling that over from what's in chapter 8, so to make sure that it's in here,
We need a definition for an inoperable vehicle.
helps in court.
Okay. Vehicle that doesn't operate?
I've had somebody argue with me that just cause, you know, their front end is crunched in and everything, it's still an operable vehicle.
Okay.
So, that's kind of the things that I'm trying to tie down in here a little bit more, so. Medical offices and clinics, that's where I think he's changed that to medical, that's just another example of multiple things in here. Is there anything else you're wanting to hit on, that we need to point out?
Yeah, like you said, there's still uses in this chart that I think we can condense down into broader categories. So kind of like moving forward, I would see the first step would be fixing these issues, these inconsistencies. And then potentially the next step would be looking to see, are these uses allowed where we want them? You know, are there any uses in here that you think should be allowed in different categories? For example, accessory apartments right now are only allowed in by conditional use in single family and single family suburban. Lots of other communities allow those in many more categories. Right now, churches are only allowed mainly via conditional use in just a few categories, not even your commercial categories. I'd say that's sticks out to me from looking at other codes. But I'm guessing that staff will probably look at those and make recommendations to the planning commission on issues like that.
You guys have any comments after looking through definitions just tonight? What I'd really like everybody to do is to look through this. We will be bringing more back to you. There'll be something emailed out to you again for probably what we're gonna do next.
Yeah, there was a couple that it kind of just, it wasn't complete, like intensive care facilities and
Yeah.
outdoor theaters and stuff. Is that stuff that you're still kind of working through?
I think those are probably gonna be condensed into a broader, maybe medical facility category.
Yeah, and we did
Something like
test that
that.
one. What was there, another one too?
Outdoor theaters.
Yeah, and I think that one I was gonna include in your indoor, outdoor entertainment.
Yeah, it was probably something you're still working through. And it looked like
Okay.
there wasn't a definition yet for machine shop, welding shop, metal furniture. It was like 10 things in one line. So I don't know if that's something else you were working through, because it
Yeah.
kind of, a long one.
I think that's probably in our code, or in our existing code now, that all those items are listed and they can be tied in together probably in,
Yeah, that's probably gonna be in manufacturing.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not listed in the use chart over here.
but it was
Well, it is right now, but it
listed
shouldn't
as our
be.
existing use and then making sure we get them pulled over here to know, so.
Gotcha.
Anything else that you saw? Okay. Nobody else? Okay. If you guys don't have anything else, that's just kind of what we wanted to go over with to start with, so everybody knew what was going on and understand what we're looking at. So, I mean, if you have time to look at it and give any other feedback that you might see, I'd appreciate it, so.
No questions? Okay. Thank you. No old business, no correspondence. Is there any off agenda?
None.
Then we can move to item 8.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second?
A motion second to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, everybody.